Hello, everyone. This week's guest is money. I mean, she's literally money. Tamara Gurney started a bank. She is the founder of Mission Valley Bank. She didn't want to leave small businesses behind and the community behind. And this is her story, and I get to go deep with her about her journey. So here we go. Let's go. Vibes, y'all. Hi, Tamara. How you doing?
Hi, Tristan. I'm great. How are you today?
Doing well. Thank you for joining me.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Well, let's get right to it.
Okay.
Almost 25 years ago, you just didn't start a business. You started a bank, which isn't a common entrepreneurial path. Can you describe the why behind that?
You're right. It's not a common entrepreneurial path for just entrepreneurs in general, but I had come from a 20-year banking relationship with a small community bank that ended up being acquired by a larger bank. And I, maybe it was Pollyanna. I thought, oh, I'm going to retire from here. They had told me I would be president, and then they sold the bank. So it essentially was born from the fact that I needed a job, and the thing that I knew how to do was banking. And so I did my research, so to speak. I checked with an attorney that had worked with me over the years, and how do you do this? What do I need to do? Wrote a business plan, was contacted by a number of my former employees, colleagues that I had worked with. They said, hey, rumor has it you're going to start a bank, and if you do, we want to come with you. So that's how it all started. Tongue in cheek, I tell people I needed a job, so I created one.
Wow. I mean, what is that? That is actually really cool. So you actually didn't know how to start a bank. You just went off of pure um, will, and it sounds like you just wanted to get a job. So, I mean, what type of personal risk did you have to take that not a lot of people know today in order to pull this thing off?
I didn't think that I was taking a huge risk to pull it off, because the risk was I'm unemployed. I have, a family. I have two boys to feed, a rent, and mortgage to make, and I was interviewing at various banks, and there were potential opportunities there. I was also being contacted by my former clients who were expressing their dissatisfaction with being not their choice moved to a larger financial institution that had different ways of handling client relationships, and they weren't happy. And so they were calling me to say, hey, we want a community, we want a bank, we want a small bank. I was like, so do I. But what do you want me to do about it? And as I was on my journey interviewing and then listening to these clients who had become friends and community leaders together, I started to think, well, gosh, I wonder how a bank did start. I mean, I went to work for one that was there, so I didn't come into. So it was just my innate curiosity, I guess. It's what got me to where I could actually start a bank and be the president of a bank. I had been at this smaller community bank for 20 years, and I started there as the secretary to the president with a high school education. So it was my curiosity when I organized him and what he had hired me to do. I had time on my hands, and I didn't want to just sit there. So I just started asking questions. How do you make loans? How does the back office function? How do you process wires? Just everything that went on every day in a bank to serve clients. And so over those 20 years, I learned it. And, not knowing, never thinking I'd be an entrepreneur and start something. I was just in that process of learning, expanding my knowledge, serving our community and our clients, and ended up without a job. And so I figured people have started banks. It's possible. People do it. So let's figure out how they did it.
Wow, that is amazing. I can't believe starting a business that is that you. I mean, you have to learn a lot of the back end. And you said you didn't do it. You didn't have a college education at the time. You had a high school education, and so that is that's awesome. How curiosity can just carry you to run a bank now that's going to be 25 years next year in July. So kudos to you. That's pretty amazing. And then plus to have a family and a mortgage, that's
Yeah,
really hats off to you
well,
for
thank
doing
you.
that. And but you know what is the motivation behind uh, the difference between a community bank versus the larger banks? And because you had an opportunity to go anywhere after 20 years of banking, I'm sure you had options, like lots of options. So, what was the motivation behind community versus the traditional banks that we're used to seeing out there, the big guys?
Right, the big guys. And the big guys, there's like the largest 19-ish banks in the country. We all heard all of that through, the unfortunate a couple of years ago with some banks that did fail. You kind of differentiate the largest banks being the Wells, the Chase, the City. City National Bank was who bought my former bank. And they're a very large bank, but they're not, well, they may be now. Looked at the asset size because they were bought by Royal Bank of Canada. But at the time, they were like a super large regional, which is still different than a community bank. So when they acquired my bank, I was offered positions there. But fortunately, the vice chairman at the time, Frank Heckney, took me under his wing and he said, look, you're the chief operating officer of the bank we just acquired. We already have a chief operating officer here. So obviously, your journey up that ladder, so to speak, there's no opportunity here. You could work in a number of areas from human resources to, operations. But he had gotten to know me and he knew, he said, I'm going to be boxing you in. I'm going to be putting you in a room with four walls and a door. And that's really not who you are. You need to go find another opportunity. So I was chief operating officer. Next step is president, CEO. And there weren't opportunities for someone like me at a larger bank, like those I just named. So it had to be. And the other driving factor was my local community clients, my client business owners in the San Fernando Valley that had banked with me for those 20 years. They wanted that small. So the business models are very, very different. A community bank is more like Main Street, think of all the little businesses that populate up and down Main Street, from your little meat market to your nail shop, your grocery store. We're just one of those. And so we operate like that, where we are all in the community, all trying to make the community better, for each providing a service, a different service. Mine is financial. But then that means maybe we're supporting small businesses to start a location in that community that provides a service that those folks need. So it's just really a different model, and it's really more, to me, personal, relationship driven, and family. It's more like a family now, where you get so big that you get centralized and you really don't know who your true customers are. And that's
Wow.
important to me.
Well, it seems like, because being in trucking, we talk a lot about relationships, but what we see on Main Street is not always uh, that loyal. I mean, for your customers to come with you and still be loyal to a community style bank versus the larger banks, that speaks volumes about your leadership skills. Do you compete with the larger banks? Do you actually look at competing with larger banks, or do you focus more on your market?
Inevitably, we have to compete. We are competing whether we are wanting to or not, because the prospect, the potential client is maybe talking to one of those larger banks, and they price to, they don't really play at what we call the margin. So it's really not the rate that they're charging. It's more in terms of, say, commercial real estate. They will package up a lot of those loans, particularly mortgages, all kinds of mortgages, whether it's residential or commercial. And they'll make a lot of those and then package them up and sell them to larger Wall Street banks. And that's when those become your securities. They're slightly a whole lot of ways, zero interest rates, strips and such. And so those become investment opportunities. They get paid fees. So they're really enticing a client, giving them a great deal on a rate because they already know what they can make on selling that. It's generally their fee income driven. We are more playing at the margin. We will charge an interest rate and try to, if your business comes in and you open an operating account with us and you put money in that account, generally operating accounts aren't paid any interest. So that's like zero cost of the raw material. And then if I make a loan, my margin is say 3%, well, I can charge 3% because I'm paying zero for my raw material and I'm earning 3% spread. So that's where we make most of our money. But the reality is the future is pushing all of us into pay for service, add value to the client and get the fee paid to you. So we get pushed into a highly competitive marketplace for interest rates. I have them happen all the time. And this is where I say, you're probably not my client, because they'll come in and say, XYZ Bank can give me, in today's market where prime is up at, 7.5%, hey, I can get 6% on a loan on my building. What can you do for me? And I will likely say, well, if you give me a few minutes to understand your business a little better and show me some financials, I'll answer that. We're not a nonprofit. We have to make our spread.
Wow. It sounds a lot like trucking, where it's almost like a race to the bottom. Someone will come up to you and not realize the back end.
Right.
And they are making money on junk fees, not really on the cost plus model, like how you guys are doing it. And that's really responsible. Is responsibility a big thing for you when it comes to one of your values in how you run Mission Valley Bank?
Absolutely. It's to play lose-lose or lose-win, somebody losing in any of those scenarios. We try to play win-win. And so when the client is coming in and they set the stage for, here's what I need or I want, and we have to talk about, well, what the bank is going to need to get. So, maybe we do make an adjustment on the interest rate because that's a bigger pain point for the client. But we charge a fee, something that made it make sense. Or we tell them, you know what, we can lower the rate if you bring in an additional deposit or a guarantor. Maybe it's your business partner or someone that's in, business partner would make more sense, and ask them to come in as an additional guarantor. It's just like we've got a lot of information on the table and they're all little pieces of the puzzle. And so you move them around until you get a fit that works. And you're like, okay, that's a good compromise. That works for me and it works for the bank. But most places don't operate that. People walk in and say, what's your rate on a loan? And bankers in every other bank will tell them, it's this. And I'm like, how can you do that? Because what if he brings in $5 million? I mean, you've got $5 million now of raw material to make more loans and make more money. There's value in that he should get.
Wow. So, I mean, it's exactly like trucking. Everyone walks in and says, what's your rate? I feel you on that. And it's really tough. I mean, you'd have to really understand the business to make a decision on it, whether you're going to take up that customer or not. But so do you actually think bigger banks care about the customer?
I think that they do because of the way they define care. Some of the bigger banks probably think that someone like me running the bank the way and our values here and how we run it probably thinks that we're crazy. And why do you take so much time to dig that deep into a relationship? What are you getting out of it? There are some amazing people that work at big banks. I mean, I hear stories all the time of people that have a relationship with larger banks that they've known the manager forever and they get great service. They walk in the door and, hey, John, how are you? How's the family? It all feels really good until something critical happens. And the big critical thing that happened in the last several years is COVID. And PPP was put out, and a lot of these business owners, everyone was fearful. How am I going to keep my business open? I can't, keep my employees. So they were all applying for PPP. And I have a gentleman that I've known for years in the community through nonprofit organizations that we volunteered at. He was a 30-year client of a very large bank. And he called me when PPP was, the first round was about to close, and he had applied at this bank and he couldn't get any information. When he went to the branch, the people that he knew, it's all handled at headquarters. We don't even know who to call. We don't know how to get you that information. He reached out to me and said, "What can I do?" And I said, "I try to help you. I need you to give me your full package that you gave them. And here's what's going to happen. I'm going to underwrite it and I'm going to put it up in the SBA portal. And one of two things will happen. It'll either come back, sorry, there's already an SBA loan number assigned, which means you got to deal with your bank and they'll talk to you someday, I hope, because they have your PPP number, but I can't help you because you can only get one. But if it comes back that you don't have a number yet and I get a number, I'll help you." And it came back that he didn't have a number. And so we got him his loan. This was on a Friday night. He called me at home. We worked on it over the weekend and we got him his money on Tuesday. So,
Wow.
That wouldn't happen. I mean, his bank of 30 years.
I could relate to his story because I mean, I'm a big fan of smaller banks. I was with Bank of California at the time. I remember I had friends that were with the bigger banks, the Chase, the Wells Fargo. I mean, their system was so impacted with so many applicants, and it was insane how fast I got mine done through a smaller bank. So I know the power of being there for your customers when you really need them. And you're right. Like I mean, I love my rep at Chase. She calls me all the time, but there's certain things that I know she's not going to be able to pull off on the back end. That's why I choose to work with smaller banks, and I'm a big fan of smaller banks because, you said the word care earlier, and what is your definition of care? I'm curious.
We talk, I think there's a word it's been pretty well overused, the trusted advisor. So somebody said it and then everybody jumped on, and I'm sure you could line up people and you get 10 versions of what that means. But to me, it's the second, there's two components to trusted advisor, and care is one of them. The trusted part is you can trust me to provide the kind of information that you're needing for what the solution and the information you're needing for what you're asking for. And if I don't know the answer personally, I know I have an expert here in that area that can. So I have a person in payments, merchant acquiring, that I can connect with a client and answer all their questions, even if it's just they're currently on a service that they don't understand what they're paying for. We'll help you dissect that and show you what you're getting. So it's really that knowledge that where you can trust me to help you. But the other piece of it is that I'm going to go the extra mile because I care about your success as a human being in this world. I mean, I think that's what it's all about for each of us. And so my folks here, we talk about it all the time. When people come in and they have a need and they ask for something, have a conversation. Don't just say, "Oh, here it is. Thank you. Have a good day." Anybody can do that. If you're cashing a check or they're making a deposit and you just get in conversation and you learn that they're having a struggle with a landlord, or there's a problem, they're trying to get a building and they can't get any answer back from a larger bank or whatever it is, you just start asking questions and saying, "Well, you know what, maybe I can get you a little bit of information. How about I call you or call who you're dealing with and see if they can make sense." So it's going the extra mile. He's silly, not silly, but things. One of my branch managers, a client came in and had their banking activity done, and they went out to the parking lot and they had a flat tire. And this was an older woman. And she came back to ask if she could use the phone to call for some help. Things like 90% of the people probably would do, which is sad.
Yeah, I mean, wow, it sounds so simple, but I love that you guys are very engaging and asking questions. That's one really good way to genuinely care about your customers coming in, because you never know what that relationship will how that relationship will end up. And it seems like you've been here for 25 years. You've done a great job at keeping to your values. But do you guys ever fail?
Absolutely. We wouldn't be here if we didn't. We do.
Yeah.
And it's funny you ask that, because it's something that I talk to my team about. I think I didn't say this, whoever coined it as like fail forward. I really believe that our best learning experiences come from failures. And if you have the tenacity and the determination to get up and learn from that and incorporate it and then move forward, that's the beauty of it. So there have been times I can go back, 30 plus years in my previous bank. There was a situation where one of the branch manager made a decision on how she handled an item for a client, and it turned out that it was either, I can't remember, it was something was wrong with the check, it was fraudulent, or it bounced on the other end, and they had given them immediate credit. But we took a $30,000. And this young lady was just mortified. I mean, she came walking to my office and I saw she had an envelope. And I said, motion to her, please come in, sit down, and let's chat. And she was very emotional, as I said. And she, was going to hand me this envelope. And I said, I put my hand up. I said, no, I want to talk. And we talked about what had happened and why. And I asked her to kind of explain her thinking and what led to that and what would she do different now. We had a nice chat, and she thanked me, and she stood up to leave, and she reached out to hand me that envelope. And I didn't move my hands at all. I just looked at her and I said, you know what? I just spent $30,000 on your education. I don't think you need to be quitting.
Oh, so, wow.
Yeah. So that was, those are the things. And now I don't tell my team to go out and lose 30 grand. Try. I tell them, if it isn't going to kill somebody or shut the bank down, try it. Just try it. And come back and tell me, what did you learn?
You're a great leader for having that much tolerance to failure, and also just being very kind about, getting an education out of that mistake. Okay. So that's, now I know why, Raquel, who has, worked under you for quite a bit, speaks highly of you. So that's awesome.
Well,
I mean,
she's one of those great examples. We talked about this once, and somebody said something to me about my legacy. I pointed at her and I said, that's my legacy. That's why I built this thing, to have that kind of a human being interact with people and share that. I'm one person. If 100 people that work here kind of are Rachels and go out and touch the world, it's amazing. That's great. But if that person had gone and done a similar thing again with poor judgment, it wouldn't have been the same conversation. So it's not like, oh, fail. Don't fail at the same thing twice.
Oh, yeah.
Then it's another issue. But I absolutely want people to get out of their comfort zone, make some decisions and think, because I don't want robots that just do that. I'm a robot. I'm just doing what I'm told to do. I want you to think. I hired your brain. And I pride myself that I think I'm a fairly good judge of people. And I think I have a great team. I have people that are amazing. But sometimes the job description keeps them in a box. And I don't want them locked in. I want them to come up and tell me, here's a way that we could do this much better than we're doing it today. That makes my whole year.
Wow. Yeah, that's great that you look at because they look at you as a mentor. That's definitely good for your legacy. So let's go back to building the bank. I mean, being a woman in banking, especially 4 decades ago, has that made you feel a little bit? Did that give you imposter syndrome at all to be running a bank in the hundreds of millions of dollars today? I mean, you guys have almost $800 million in assets. So as a woman, I want to know, do you have some sort of imposter syndrome at all? High school diploma. I know you got your college degree later on, but as far as just like the circumstances that you experience, it's pretty insane that you're running a bank. And I want to know about this imposter syndrome. Does that ever creep up?
That was very powerful and driving in the very beginning, because even as the chief operating officer of my last bank, I felt many times like I was doing the CEO job. So when I started the bank and I'm sitting in the actual chair, I had all the confidence in the world in the process of writing the application and going through the regulatory approvals and getting the team set. And day one on the job, I sit in that chair and I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. And I better, take it. So nobody knows. So yes, the absolute imposter syndrome, 100%. My very first bank conference of CEOs that I went to, it was a massive convention room, conference room. Up in the front of the room was the stage where the speakers were going to be. And there was this massive sea of dark black suits, white collars, white hair, and all that. And I believe, the only female. And interestingly enough, I don't recall now, all these years later, it being something that I planned, but I walked in wearing a red suit. And in that sea of black, I obviously stood up. I was the only female CEO or female at all there. And so what I learned and I kept my mouth shut because I didn't want them to know that I didn't know being a CEO. And I figured they were the smartest people there, and I was going to say, and I was going to learn. And I did that for a number of years. I just kept quiet and listened. The thing I noticed as there became more and more women in executive level positions in banks would show up at these conferences, I started to see something that was interesting to me. It appeared that a lot of the women, or at least some of the women, felt like to get ahead and to get into that top role, I've got to behave like a man, and became aggressive and, all those attributes. And I never did that. And it started to, I guess it was proving to me my way was at least the way, if not the right way, it was the way I was. And that was, I'm not going to play that game. I'm not going to come in and try to be a male version in a room full of men. I'm going to come in and I'm going to be confident, or at least fake it, be confident among them and speak up and interact at their level. But I think there's something in terms of being a female that is shown over the years is very valuable in the success of many businesses. Many women-owned businesses, just banks, are very, very successful because of that woman's touch, so to speak. The intuitiveness, many times, and I believe communication is at the heart of almost every problem, bank or no bank, that we experience. It's the human interaction and where it breaks down. And that's where women tend to have, I think, a leg ahead, so to speak, because of that intuitiveness. So a lot of issues can be addressed in a way where you don't have to get your big stick out and use your title to reprimand people or put them down or whatever. You can do it in a much more productive way, I think. And so over the years, I've just learned to use that femininity, if you will, but not femininity of word sounds, but more, hey, I'm a woman, but I'm a leader. You're a man and you're a leader. Let's be on the same playing field. I'm not better, you're not better. But I'm not going to act like some of the men I know. My former boss at the bank I was with for 20 years was the best thing that could happen to me, because I learned exactly what not to do.
Oh. Were the men in those conferences, were they really that smart?
Some of them were.
Of course.
And I was listening to them. But you know what ended up happening many times? I would go to some of these events and we would carpool from the airport over to the event and then back. And so I would have 2 or 3 men in the car going to the airport, and they would start to talk about some of the topics that were covered in the conference. And I was more comfortable in that small environment. And these were men that I knew better. And was more comfortable, like, hey, let's catch a ride to the airport together. So when they started talking, I felt more comfortable to respond and inject my thoughts into the conversation. And what I started hearing back from them consistently was, why didn't you bring that up in the meeting? Everybody could have benefited from hearing, because we didn't do that. That's a really good way of approaching this. So I kept getting that feedback of, you need to speak up. You need to speak up. You have something to say. But I was so overwhelmed with that imposter syndrome, I didn't want to let anybody know that I didn't think I knew what the heck I was doing. It's much better now, 25 years in, but there are still times when I see a successful, male CEO that I'm still kind of, you elevate their presence over you.
No, I mean, it's tough. I mean, I'm sure you're, I feel it too. No matter how much money you make or how much you manage, you're always going to feel a little bit of insecurity, or especially it creeps in, imposter syndrome. You'd never think you're good enough just because you see yourself as that person in the, like what you had to go through. And sometimes if you didn't go to Harvard or you didn't go to, you didn't have it all in your life, you start to feel that you're not good enough. And that's something that as an entrepreneur, I feel the same way all the time. I'm like, how did I even accomplish this? But you know what, like going back to what you said, it was curiosity. It wasn't about education. It was, you just continue to keep learning. I feel like you continue to learn, and that's what makes you come up with these great ideas and have a lot of contribution. So, but going back to your legacy, what are you most proud of in this 25 years of entrepreneurship and in banking of all things?
I think it's the impact I have over all these years, time and time again, on the people, both inside the bank and outside. So I'll give you two examples. The young woman that started, this was years ago when we were very small. When we opened our doors, we all wore generous because I'm not going to hire a chief credit officer, but I'm not going to hire a loan underwriter or a processor. I mean, he's going to do everything until we get big enough that we can hire those positions. And that was the case for everyone. And so as we were getting a little bigger, we had we had a loan operations group, a couple of people. And we hired a young woman who she was from Iran or Iraq, I'm trying to remember, that's from the Middle East. And a young gal, 17, 18 years old, had, I guess, not had was leaving the area, so didn't have a great experience, wanted to get to this country. Came here, no work experience, young. We hired her in and said, okay, we need somebody to do all the things that just make copies, file documents, bring me a cup of coffee, clean up the kitchen, just, stuff that needs to get done. Because she didn't have skills and we just needed somebody to give all those loose things to. And so over time, again, curiosity, hungry, wanting to learn. About 4 or 5 years later, she had moved her way up in the department and was doing processing and more important work that she could earn more money. But she ended up leaving the bank because she got an opportunity at another bank to actually run that department at that bank. So here you have a young person who comes in with nothing and needs to just feed herself and clothe and all that ends up having a career and a profession, making good money. On the one hand, you hate to lose good people, but that is a huge success story. But that's a journey that young lady made and wouldn't have made it if we hadn't given her the chance. And, those stories exist on the customer side. Clients that we helped out through the Great Recession that would have gone out of business. I run into people like that even to this day. A large landscaping company that tells me, I go to interesting economic conference, and he happened to be there, and he came and said, I think he called me, whatever, Empress or Queen, like, oh, geez, please stop. He said, no, I wouldn't be here. My business wouldn't be here today if you hadn't stepped in. And he said, we are a $200 million shop today, and I was on the brink of falling.
Wow.
But you stood by me. So those are the things that get me out of bed in the morning. And I could tell you 100 stories just like that, of businesses that couldn't get niches. She wrote a business plan that was the best business plan we'd ever seen. And she'd been turned down by 10 banks. And we said, hey, we've got a great business plan, but we're not an equity partner. We need you. If this thing doesn't work, we need you to have as much training as we have. So we're willing to come in. Who in you and your family can come in with something. And we ended up doing that loan, and Ventures is worldwide. So it's just, it doesn't fit in a box. We're different. We take the box and we move it around to fit the situation.
My kids love Menchie's, by the way.
Oh, good.
And the competition's pretty strong in the yogurt space. You have Yogurtland, and you have then all these other, and then they just load it up with gummy bears. At least that's what my kids did. So
exactly. And there was a lot of competition when she came out with her idea. And that's why, when you look at the plan, though, she had done her home. And the story it told said, if this is the right human to do this, this is going to work. And she brought in people, and it was the right combination. So there's stories of business transition. Owner that didn't have children handed off to one of his employees that he thought highly of. And we helped make that transition. Where that young man now, 10 years later, he's running the business and he's got a family and he's wealthy. And that's why we do it.
I'd love to know, you said it's the best business plan you've ever seen. What made it the best other than I also like when you said basically made the decision based on the founder. But other than that, what made that business plan so awesome?
It was the most thorough, thinking of everything that could possibly go wrong, and then researching to say, okay, if this, then this is how we mitigate it. So from the
Wow.
basic ones are always like, what is the opportunity? So you look at similar businesses and what their sales are and how they're doing, and what is the size population they serve, and you try to replicate that in a similar area. So she had really looked into where she wanted to start. And I know she had a longer term plan, her store, the next store. But she had just taken it that extra mile, if you will, that most people don't. A lot of people that have come to me over the years with ideas, they go from I want to open a miniature golf course in, Redding, California. Can you give me money? It's like, well, the first thing you did wrong was say give. No, it's not a gift. But what's your plan? And they don't have a plan. They just love miniature golf, and they think everybody else does. That's the extreme on one end. Most plans are, they're complete, they're thorough, they have projections. What we look for is your projection realistic? Or are you so enamored of this business that you think you're going to blow the doors? And you can usually see that right away. And so you scale it back to what you think reality is. And then you decide if it would underwrite, if it'll get service, if they'll be successful. I think she must have thought of everything. Well, what if, a meteor from Mars hits the building or something? It was like she just thought of everything.
She didn't just use total addressable market, right? She didn't just go, oh, but the market's so big. Look at all these kids that want to put gummy bears on top of their yogurt.
Right.
That's awesome. Well, I mean, you actually have two kids on your own, and
Yep.
You use the word give, and I, read about it where you have one son that is selling organic produce, and the other is a writer. Do you give them money or do you lend them money? No, I'm just joking. But
one of them could probably lend me money.
Oh, wow. Really? Is that the organic produce?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, he's done extremely well.
That's so
I'm very
interesting.
proud of him because in organic produce, has a very short shelf life because of, obviously, they don't use the pesticides and all of that. So it's highly regulated. And so even though some of the fruits and vegetables are still very much edible, from their regulatory perspective, they have to, by a certain date, they have to sell it or they have to dump it, destroy it. And so when things get close to the end of their shelf life, you don't want to have to do that. What he did, which kind of made me proud in terms of using the word give, he started what I would call a food ministry, because he'd go over with his truck, they were going to dump, and he would cart it into his truck, and he would take it around areas where he knew they had little nonprofit, where there were, homeless services or other, people that needed the food. And he would go and distribute it and give it away. And it got to be so big, people noticed it and said, hey, I want to help you. Some of the other workers did too. And it ended up being like a couple dozen people on a weekend that they were segregated into. Some were picking up the food and distributing it, trucking it to wherever it was going to go. Some were cooking food for the workers, and it became a little business. And it was all free. They donated their time on the weekend, and they gave the food to all of these families. And I felt as a proud mama,
Wow.
that he would do that. My writer child, I have given some money to. He's the educated one. My oldest, who is in produce, went into the war in the Middle East, the first the first war there. And he was injured, came home. He didn't go to college, so he got into the produce business. But my younger son has his master's in fine arts, and he is writes poetry, which there is not a huge market for, at least financially, we don't do well. But he's what I affectionately call my bohemian child. When I go have my annual physical and the doctor says, you should slow down a little bit. Maybe you should like take after your younger son who sort of enjoys life. He still surfs, he still plays soccer, and he works enough to pay the bills. And he really doesn't have a desire for a whole lot more because he's just happy in the university.
Wow. At what interest rates did you set him at? Just kidding. Well, I mean, that's so awesome that your older son is into philanthropy, because I noticed that you're also part of the community foundations of the valleys. What
Right.
did your son take that after you? Because you've been in philanthropy for a long time. I was really surprised to see that.
Yeah.
And not only are you helping the community with the financial side of it, but you also have a giving side. I know you don't like to use the word give in banking, but in the community, it seems like you give a lot.
Right. We use the word in banking when we're giving back to our community. We have a program that we ran. We use a lot of our marketing dollars in a program called Give Where You Live.
Wow.
And it emanated, and this is where the Community Foundation of the Valleys started too. It came out of the Valley Economic Alliance around the Great Recession time. But what I was always frustrated with in the San Fernando Valley, it's a huge economy. I think it equates to to states in the union. We're bigger than most states in the union, and yet we're just the San Fernando Valley, a portion of LA County. And yet I live here and I work here, and my tax dollars seem to go to the west side so that the streets are nice and there's no potholes and all of that. So you may remember that a number of years ago, this San Fernando Valley tried to secede from LA because we were upset that we got potholes on the freeway on the 5 right by my branch, and we've got the streets aren't cared for. If you are in philanthropy, you can go to the west side to a fundraiser for a women's center and they'll raise $1 million. You can come to the San Fernando Valley to a women's center here, and if they raise 40,000, it would be a lot. So my message to my community that I work in and live in is, if you want this place to be better and where you're proud to live and play, you've got to put your tax dollars here. And your tax dollars are going to go where the government sends them. You've got to put your philanthropic dollars here. So you can give to childcare, you can give to hospitals, you can give all the services that you want, you should donate to and keep them here. It's the only way you can control the infrastructure in your own community, because your tax dollar goes wherever they send it. You can plead for it to come back here, but it doesn't. And so that's why we do Give Where You Live and talk about the great nonprofits that are here that are doing such good work, and they need your money to keep doing the work. So I tell businesses, be philanthropic, give money to these organizations. You're going to get it back. So that's
Yeah,
all
no,
I
it all makes sense now after doing my research on what you're doing. Your son being a veteran, and you being a single mom and living in the San Fernando Valley. It's really underserved. So I get it. This is where I feel like your mission is to give back to that community. Not only obviously, I truly believe in building something that can't be the nonprofit. So you're building a for-profit bank, for example, so that you could give back to nonprofit, because that's the only way you could do it. You can't just, you need something for profit to give you the legs to do things for nonprofit, which is amazing. And so, if Mission Valley Bank were to disappear tomorrow, what would you miss most about running a bank?
All that we just talked about. I guess I would go look for some other organization. I think I'm too old to start another bank. I'm not sure I have much use left. But, and it's a whole different world today, regulatory wise. they've taken a lot of the fun out of banking. So I try to be a rebel and just do it anyway until I'm not here anymore. I think I would probably go back to spending more of my time at places like Community Foundation in the Valleys, because they're trying to get that message out that, hey, business owner, think about corporate philanthropy because it's going to help you. And it's going to help you both in your business and in your personal life, as it helps provide services to your family and to your own employees. Getting the word out, because it's amazing to me how many people don't think that way and don't realize it. I talk to people every day that, where do you donate? Are you charitable? Where do you send your money? Oh, I went to university in New York and I send them money every year. That's great. That's great because that's a good university and they probably need your help. What do you do here? What do you do where you live? Do you like the potholes? Do you like the sidewalk, buckling up and you can't even ride your bike over it? There's things we can do here if we take ownership and accountability. And instead of just complaining that they don't fix it, they never come, it'll be 3 years. Well, you can sit around and mope and, be angry, or you can get up and do something.
Yeah, you're both a go-getter and a go-giver. That's awesome. Let's wrap this thing up. I have one last question. What advice would you give anyone who is struggling right now financially?
I think that too often we listen to the voices outside, and sometimes they're the voices that tell you all the reasons why you can't. And I'm a really strong believer in what you focus on is what you get. And if you say you can't, you can't. So I tell people every day, believe in yourself. There's a reason you started this. Go back to feel the onion back to the beginning and look at why you're here. And if something's changed, do you just need to adapt? Rather than just getting consumed by, I'm struggling, I don't know where to go, I don't have the money. You're talking to me, you found me, we can figure this out. So I would just tell them, don't give up on yourself. If you put your mind to it and you think positively, like, how do I solve this problem, not why am I in this situation? 2 different answers. Why I'm in this situation is all the negative. How you got here. How do I solve it is solution based. So that's my advice, is just believe in you. Don't let anybody outside of you tell you you can't do something. And do it. And if you fail, try it again. Keep going.
Wow. Thank you, because it's awesome. I'm sure the listeners are going to get a lot out of this one, because you're the money store.